Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show in which we discuss all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we have a brand new deck for you, but before that, just a quick reminder to please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed my videos. We're well on our way to 1 million subscribers and every single click counts. And today's deck is going to be centered around Marina Vendrell. For 1 white, 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red, and 1 green, she's a legendary creature, human warlock 3/5 with, when Marina Vendrell enters, reveal the top 7 cards of your library. Put all enchantment cards from among them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And tap, lock or unlock a door of target room you control. Activate only as a sorcery. So apologies again for not making any videos, but I've had no voice for the last week and it's currently slowly coming back, so I'm finally excited to make this deck because I've been looking forward to it since the moment I saw the art from this commander. It's absolutely gorgeous and I always love theme decks like this, particularly with rooms, since they're such a unique and cool mechanic that I'm pretty excited to have such a powerful value commander at the helm. Now obviously the deck is going to be almost entirely centered around rooms. I think we're running 23 of them, which is pretty high. Honestly, you could probably afford to go a little bit lower, but I just wanted to lean into this cool mechanic. There's an alternate win con that you can pull off with rooms as well, which is really sweet, but I think the deck can provide a lot of value even without that alternate win con, so I'm very excited to jump into it. So without further ado, let's get started, and we're starting off with Aminato Veil Piercer. Now this is going to be really solid in the deck, even though we're not building around it specifically. Getting to surveil every upkeep is pretty nice. We have a few cards that care about the graveyard or that can take advantage of it, so that's solid. And then obviously if we hit an enchantment and get it reduced by 4, that is the nuts. Archon of Sun's Grace is great in any Enchantress deck, and this is definitely that. It's going to give us a nice bunch of bodies that we can either use to chump, pressure our opponents, or gain some life. Bloom Tender is amazing in any 5-color deck, and this is no different. It can provide a ton of mana for us. Doomwake Giant is really good against token decks, and in this deck we can reliably trigger this a few times per turn since we have a bunch of cards that make token enchantments, which can make it very, very strong. Eidolon of Blossoms is one of my favorite Enchantress effects because it immediately replaces itself. It just feels so good to play, to know that you're getting your card back immediately and then having value sit on the table. Enduring Innocence is going to trigger a ton in this deck. We have a lot of creatures that are really small and we have a lot of ways to make tokens. Enduring Vitality similarly works really nicely with the deck because we can use all of those tokens that we're making to tap them for mana. Entity Tracker is going to be one of the all-stars in this deck. It's going to trigger every time an enchantment comes in and every time we fully unlock a room. That's a lot of triggers. Fateborrow Elder is just like Bloom Tender, but it can be even more powerful since it can swing in on attack, but in any case having more copies of Bloom Tender is already good enough. Fear of Sleep Paralysis is really solid if we can keep it alive. It's going to unfortunately have a huge target on its head, but even so in the meantime it keeps our opponent's creatures tapped, which is really powerful. Ghostly Dancers is amazing in this deck. It's going to either recur one of our enchantments or unlock a room, both of which are effects that we really want, and then getting all those eerie triggers, giving us a bunch of flyers, is even better. Ghostly Keybearer is on the weaker side of cards in this deck, but it can still be really powerful if we can reliably connect with it. Gremlin Tamer I really like in the deck. It looks really unassuming, but coming down early means that this is going to trigger a lot and give us a lot of bodies that we can then buff with a bunch of our other cards. Herald of the Pantheon does 2 things very well. It provides us a nice little life buffer with all the enchantments we're playing, and it also makes them cheaper, so it's perfect in this deck. Inquisitive Glimmer couldn't be more perfect if it tried. A 2/3 body is already pretty solid in the early game, but giving all your unlock and enchantment cards 1 mana less is incredibly powerful. Jukai Naturalist is yet another card that is going to reduce the cost of our enchantments, which is definitely something we want. Mesa Enchantress fits perfectly in the deck by drawing us cards whenever we play enchantments. Underspirit Dancer is incredibly powerful with rooms because we can get to abuse their ETB triggers over and over. Usually enchantments don't have ETBs, but in this deck they do a lot, which makes this card particularly good here. Overlord of the Hauntwoods is one that I've included just because I own the card. Courser of Prufix is a nice substitution. Sanctum Weaver taps for a ton of mana, and this is a very mana hungry deck, so we love to see it. Tateshan Champion is going to grow itself larger and larger whilst drawing us cards. What else could we ask for? Skullslap Nuisance is going to give us a lot of surveil, and again we have a bunch of ways to take advantage of our graveyard, so this is very nice. Sithis Harvest's Hand is the best Enchantress effect in Commander, so it's no surprise that it finds its place into this list. Master of Keys is one of those ways we can take advantage of a stocked graveyard. This fits very nicely with what the deck is trying to do. Victor Valgavoth's Seneschal is another way to fill up our graveyard, but it can also give us some really powerful triggers if we get to play multiple enchantments per turn, which isn't that difficult in this deck. And Zura Eternal Schemer is a nice win con that can also protect our enchantments and pad our life total. It's very strong. For sorceries, we're running Starfall Invocation, which is very solid in the deck because we can promise somebody the gift, kill all of our creatures, and bring back Marina, thus getting her trigger again immediately. nicely. For instance, we have an offer you can't refuse, just a nice little bit of cheap interaction. And then clever concealment and Teferi's protection are crucial in this deck. We don't want to be hit by an untimely farewell, so both of these can keep our permanents safe. For artifacts, I wanted to highlight Patriot's Seal because it's just so good with Marina. Getting to untap her once and use her ability again is solid. And moving on to enchantments, so starting off with Bottomless Pool and Locker Room. This is solid because it gives us some very cheap interaction and a cheap way to trigger our Enchantress effects, and then getting some card draw is always nice. Central Elevator and Promising Stairs is great as a tutor for one of our rooms and then a way to win the game. Charge, Foyer, and Warped Space gives us some really nice card advantage that can later just be insane if we open Warped Space with Marina. Cramped Vents and Access Maze are both really solid. Again, we are going to spend quite a bit of life on this, but we have a bunch of ways to gain life. Defiled Crypt and Cadaver Lab can be pretty decent. We have a couple of ways to trigger Defiled Crypt, but this is here mainly as a cheap way to trigger our Enchantress effects. Dollmaker's Shop can come down for very cheap early and then slowly grow an army that can eventually overwhelm our opponents if we flip Porcelain Gallery. Experimental Lab and Staff Room is one of the weaker rooms in the deck, but it's still pretty solid. We get a 4/4 trample for 4, and then we can grow our creatures with Staff Room. Funeral Room Awakening Hall can be really good, even in a deck like this without that many creatures. It's just really solid to have that kind of effect on the Funeral Room side because we're running so many tokens, and then Awakening Hall is just a nice bonus on top, particularly when we can use it for free and repeatedly thanks to Marina. Glassworks and Shattered Yard gives us nice removal and then just a way to slowly whittle down our opponents. And Entryway and Elegant Rotunda is another one of the slightly weaker rooms that we have, but it still comes down for very cheap and we do need some cheap ones. Greenhouse and Rickety Gazebo make sure that our mana is pretty solid, and actually Rickety Gazebo is just great at fueling our graveyard and giving us some nice recursion. Meat Locker and Drowned Diner provides a little bit of stalling for our deck and gives us a little bit of card advantage. Mirror Room and Fractured Realm can be absolutely insane with a lot of the value creatures that we're running. If we copy an Enchantress, this can really go off. And then obviously Fractured Realm is just incredible with all of the triggered abilities that our rooms have. Moldering Gym and Weight Room is decent as a way to ramp early on, and then a nice mana sink in Weight Room. Painter's Studio Interface Gallery seems a little bit weak on the surface, but actually the impulse effect is quite strong on this one, and being able to buff all of our token army on attack isn't that bad at all. Polluted System and Dim L'Oubliette is going to be really solid with all of the milling and surveilling that we're doing, and being able to reanimate a creature is incredibly powerful. Restricted Office and Lecture Hall gives us a board wipe on a room, which is obviously really good, and giving our stuff hexproof is very nice as well. Roaring Furnace and Steaming Sauna gives us a steady stream of cards that can also be used as removal. Secret Arcade and Dusty Parlor is going to be one of the most powerful cards in the deck, no doubt. Turning everything into an enchantment and putting counters on our stuff as we play enchantments is just so powerful. Shark Typhoon is going to trigger a lot with all of the non-creatures that we're running in this deck, and it's an enchantment in itself, so it just fits very nicely. Smoky Lounge and Misty Salon works really nicely in the deck. It's basically giving us a soul ring every turn on the front side, and then it can make a huge flyer when we need it to, and of course with Marina we can get this over and over, so it's very powerful. Sphere of Safety buys us a lot of time in this deck so that we can set up our engines. Surgical Suite and Hospital Room doesn't seem that strong initially, but it's actually quite good because being able to reanimate a value creature from our graveyard is really solid. All of our enchantresses cost 3 or less, so that's amazing. Ticket Booth and Tunnel of Hate is again a little bit on the weaker side, but it's nice to have an enchantment that we can play early that later gives us a little bit of value. Unholy Annex and Ritual Chamber is really powerful in this deck. Yes, it has a minor downside, but that being said, thanks to our commander, we can close this room and reopen it to keep getting the demons, so it's fairly safe. And Virtue of Persistence is another flex slot that you can change for something else if you don't like this. I just like the fact that our commander can draw us this and it can still be played early as removal. Finally, for lands, I wanted to highlight Hall of Heliod's Generosity is a great way to recur our stuff, and it works very well, of course, with Aminato as well. And Valgavoth's Lair is a land that's an enchantment. Yes, it comes in tapped, which is a little bit weak, but the fact that we can hit it with our commander is very solid. So there you have it. That has been my Marina Vendrell deck tech. What do you think about this one? This is one that I'm super excited for, and I can't wait to get my hands on and start playing because it's going to be a blast. I can totally tell it. I love incremental value decks, and this is totally going to be that. What do you think? Are there any cards that I missed or things I shouldn't have included? Let me know in the comment section below. I always make sure to read all your comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like or subscribe. It really helps the channel. And until next time, take care.